He'd tested 100 people and found nothing but greed. Then a broke, sarcastic graphic designer sat beside him on a freezing sidewalk and said, "You look like a stock photo of bad decisions. Want half my energy bar?" The boardroom smelled like power, expensive leather, aged whiskey, and the cologne of men who'd never heard the word no. Scott Vale sat at the head of the table, 32 years old and cold as the marble beneath his fingertip. 8 men in tailored suits waited for him to decide someone's fate. "Carmichael's out," Scott said flatly. "Make it clean." They nodded and scattered. Alone, Scott stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the city sprawled below him like a conquered kingdom. He owned half of it, controlled the other half, and felt absolutely nothing. His phone buzzed, another text from a socialite he'd met once. "Missing you, handsome." She wasn't. She was missing his black card and the Instagram clout. He deleted it. His second-in-command, Rico, entered. "The mayor's office is asking for a meeting. Wants to discuss community investment." Scott's laugh was sharp. Translation: wants a bribe without calling it one. "Pretty much." Scott grabbed his coat. "I'm going out." "Where?" "Somewhere real." He paused at the elevator. "You ever wonder if people would spit on you if your bank account hit zero?" Rico blinked. "You good, boss?" Scott didn't answer. Because no, he wasn't. 32. Untouchable. Empty. An idea curled in his mind, dark, cynical, irresistible. What if I became nobody? What if I tested this whole rotten city? He wanted to see it. If a single soul would show kindness to someone with nothing, prove him wrong, or confirm what he already believed, that humanity was just another transaction. Real quick, if you're the type of person who actually stops for people who need help, prove it by hitting subscribe. Unlike Scott's test, this one's way easier. Now back to the story. Katie Nicole squinted at her laptop screen in the corner of Joe's Coffee, wondering if her client, Brad with 2DS, actually understood what minimalist logo design meant. Because this was the 8th revision request for a dog grooming startup. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Brad. "Can we add a little more pizzazz? Maybe a top hat on the poodle." Katie typed back. "Brad, we've talked about this. Top hats don't say, 'Trust me with your pet.' They say, 'I run a Ponzi scheme.'" 3 dots. Then, "Okay, but what about a small top hat?" She closed her laptop. "I need new clients or a lobotomy. Possibly both." 28 years old. 2 design degrees. Student loans that laughed at her every month. A portfolio she was proud of and a bank account that made her cry. But she kept hustling. Taking jobs from Brads who wanted poodles in formal wear. Working until 2 a.m. because the coffee shop Wi-Fi was free and her apartment's internet got shut off last week. She packed up, waved to Joe, who let her squat for hours on a single coffee, and stepped into the November night. Froze immediately. Oh, come on. She glared at the sky. It was November. Cold had no business being this personal. She pulled her thin jacket tighter. The good coat was at the dry cleaners until she could afford the pickup fee, and started walking. 15 minutes to her apartment. She could survive 15 minutes. Halfway home, stomach growling, she ducked into a bodega, grabbed a $2 energy bar, dinner of champions, and kept moving. That's when she saw him. A man slumped against a closed storefront. Rough coat, worn boots, head down. The kind of invisible the city stepped over. Katie slowed. "Keep walking. You're broke. Tired. You've got your own problems." But her feet stopped anyway. Because Katie Nicole, despite her sarcasm and her overdrawn bank account, had never been able to walk past someone who was hurting. She sighed. "I'm gonna regret this," and walked over. Scott had been sitting on that corner for 3 hours. 72 people had passed. 68 didn't even glance. 3 tossed coins without stopping, 1 dime, 2 nickels. Like feeding pigeons. 1 businessman actually stepped over his leg while on a phone call about stock options. His hidden camera caught it all. A greatest hits reel of human indifference. He was about to call it, experiment over, cynicism confirmed, when he heard footsteps stop. He didn't look up. Probably another coin tosser. Hey! A woman's voice. Young. Tired. He lifted his head slowly. She was crouched in front of him, eyebrows raised, head tilted like she was diagnosing a computer virus. Late 20s, dark hair falling out of a messy bun, wearing a jacket too thin for November and an expression that said she'd seen some things. You okay? She asked. Scott grunted. Fine. Hom. And I'm dating Chris Hemsworth. She sat down on the freezing sidewalk next to him like it was a park bench. You look like a stock photo titled Consequences of My Actions. When's the last time you ate? He blinked. Nobody had sat with him. I'm not hungry. Your stomach just growled loud enough to register on the Richter scale. Try again. She pulled an energy bar from her pocket, broke it in half, offered him a piece. Scott stared at it. At her. You don't know me. Correct. I also don't know why Netflix keeps recommending me true crime documentaries, but here we are. You want the chocolate chip half or the sad granola half? Despite himself, despite the armor he'd worn for a decade, Scott felt his mouth twitch. Chocolate chip. Smart man. She handed it over, bit into her half. They sat in silence for a moment, chewing. Then she spoke, softer. Nights are the hardest, aren't they? When it's quiet and you're alone with all the stuff you're trying not to think about. Scott's chest tightened. Who is this woman? Yeah, he said quietly. They are. She pulled off her scarf, thin, fraying, probably the only one she owned, and wrapped it around his neck. It's colder tonight. Shelter's on 5th, if you need it. You don't have another scarf, he said. She shrugged. I've got a functioning thyroid in spite. I'll survive. She stood, brushed off her jeans. I'm Katie, by the way. Katie Nicole. He hesitated. Scott. Well, Scott. Try not to freeze to death. The universe clearly kept you alive this long for a reason. She smiled, genuine, warm, real, and walked away. Scott sat there, clutching a half-eaten energy bar and a scarf that smelled like jasmine and coffee shop Wi-Fi. Something in his chest cracked wide open. This wasn't supposed to happen. The penthouse felt colder than the street. Scott stood in his marble shower, scalding water beating down, and he still felt the ghost of that threadbare scarf around his neck. He'd kept it. Told himself it was evidence. Part of the experiment. Lies. Rico found him at the window an hour later, whiskey in hand, staring at nothing. So? Rico asked carefully. How'd the social experiment go? Ongoing, Scott said flatly. You get what you needed? Proof that people are garbage. Scott took a long drink. Something like that. But his eyes drifted to the scarf, folded on his desk. Next to it, the energy bar wrapper. He'd kept that too. Rico followed his gaze, then looked at Scott like he'd grown a second head. Boss, you good? She was an anomaly, Scott said, more to himself than Rico. Probably recognized me. Or she's working an angle. What angle involves giving a homeless guy her only scarf? Scott's jaw tightened. I don't know yet. Or, crazy thought, maybe she's just a decent person. Those don't exist. You sure about that? Scott wasn't. Not anymore. He grabbed his coat. I'm going back. Why? Because he had to know. If it was real. If she was real. To complete the experiment. Katie's laptop screen glared at her in the 1 a.m. darkness of Joe's coffee. She was onto revision number 9 for Brad's logo. Her neck hurt. Her bank account had sent her a low balance alert that was honestly just rude. And she kept thinking about the guy from last night. God. The one with the haunted eyes and the voice like gravel and loneliness. She hoped he'd gone to the shelter. Hoped he was warm. Her friend and fellow coffee shop squatter, Maya, plopped down across from her. You've got that face. What face? Your I helped a stranger and now I'm emotionally invested face. What'd you do? Katie sighed. Gave a homeless guy my scarf and half my dinner. Katie. Babe. You can barely afford your own dinner. I know, but, she groaned. He just looked so lost. Like he'd forgotten people could be kind. And you, Katie Nicole, fixer of all broken things, couldn't help yourself. It's a problem. It's gonna get you hurt one day. Katie closed her laptop. Maybe. But what's the alternative? Walk past people like they're invisible? I can't do that, Maya. I tried once. Felt sick for a week. Your heart's gonna bankrupt you. Probably. Katie stood, packed her bag. But at least I'll be broke with a clear conscience. She saw him again on her walk home. Same corner. Same slumped posture. Her heart did a stupid little jump. He didn't go to the shelter. Katie exhaled a cloud of frost. Oh, you've gotta be kidding me. But her feet were already carrying her across the street. Toward him. Again. The sky opened up without warning. 1 second Katie was crossing the street toward Scott, the next she was drenched. November rain in the city wasn't romantic, it was personal. Cold, mean, and torrential. Perfect. Just perfect. She jogged the last few feet, slid down next to him against the wall. Of course it rains. Why wouldn't it rain? Scott looked at her, water dripping from his hair. You came back. Yeah, well, my decision-making skills are clearly questionable. She wiped her face. You didn't go to the shelter. Didn't feel right. And pneumonia feels better? She glanced around. The rain was getting worse. No awning, no cover. She made a decision she'd probably regret. Okay. Come on. What? My place. It's 10 minutes away. You can dry off, get warm, and I can pretend I make responsible choices. She stood, offered her hand. Scott stared at it. You don't know me. You keep saying that like it's gonna change my mind. Newsflash, Scott. I also don't know if that bodega on 5th uses real chicken in their chicken salad, but I eat it anyway. Life's a risk. You coming or not? Against every instinct that had kept him alive for 32 years, Scott took her hand. Her apartment was small. Like, napkin with delusions of grandeur, small. One room serving as bedroom, office, and kitchen. A couch that looked like it was held together by duct tape and prayer. A desk buried under sketches, design mock-ups, and coffee cup. But it was hers. Clean. Bright. Photos on the wall, her with a younger guy who had her smile, probably her brother. Library books stacked by the bed. A tiny succulent on the windowsill that she'd clearly named because there was a label. Herbert. Scott felt like he'd stepped into another universe. Okay, so, full disclosure, Katie said, grabbing a towel from a drawer. This place violates several fire codes and my landlord thinks working heat is a suggestion. But it's dry. She tossed him the towel. Bathroom's there if you want to wash up. I'll make tea. You don't have to. I'm already violating stranger danger protocols. Might as well go full chaos. She filled a kettle, set it on the hot plate. Also, if you're a serial killer, just know I have pepper spray, student debt that makes me fearless, and a very loud scream. So, you know. Choose wisely. Scott surprised himself by almost laughing. Noted. While he cleaned up in the tiny bathroom, he caught sight of himself in the mirror. Hollow-eyed. Scruffy. For a moment, he didn't recognize himself. And weirdly, that didn't feel wrong. When he emerged, Katie handed him a mug of tea and a blanket. Here. Sit. Don't break my couch, it's vintage. And by vintage I mean garbage I found on the street. He sat carefully. The couch groaned but held. She curled up on the other end, her own mug warming her hands. For a while they just sat there. Rain hammering the window. Steam rising from their cups. Why'd you help me? Scott asked quietly. Katie shrugged. Because you looked like you needed it. And because, I don't know. When I was a kid, my family went through a rough patch. People helped us. Strangers. And it stuck with me, I guess. That kindness isn't about whether someone deserves it. It's about whether you're willing to give it. Scott's throat tightened. That's rare. So's common sense, apparently. Yet here we are. She smiled over the rim of her mug. You always this chatty, or is brooding silence your default? Default. Figured. Strong silent type. Very mysterious. Women probably love that. Not really. Then you're doing it wrong. She set her mug down. Okay, real talk. What's your story? And before you go I don't want to talk about it. Just know I let you into my apartment. The least you can do is give me a PG-13 version of your tragic backstory. Scott met her eyes. Sharp. Kind. Refusing to let him hide. So he told her a version of the truth. I had power. Made decisions. Controlled things. Then I lost someone I loved, and none of it mattered. Now I'm trying to figure out if there's anything real left. Katie was quiet for a moment. Then, that's the saddest thing I've heard all week. And I design logos for people who name their businesses Possum Cuts with a straight face. Despite everything, Scott laughed. Really laughed. And for the first time in years, the cold didn't reach him. Morning came too fast. Katie woke to find Scott already awake, sitting by the window, staring out at the city. He'd tried to fold the blanket. It looked like a fabric crime scene, but the effort was there. You sleep at all? She asked, yawning. Some. Liar. She shuffled to her hot plate, started coffee. Want some? Yeah. Thanks. She poured 2 cups. Mismatched mugs. One said, Freelance Life, with a crying emoji, the other was a chipped tourist mug from Atlantic City. She handed him Atlantic City. So, she said, settling cross-legged on the couch. Since we've now had a sleepover, I feel like we've upgraded to actual acquaintances. Which means I get to ask nosy questions. Do I get to not answer them? You can try. I'm very persistent. It's annoying. She sipped her coffee. You mentioned losing someone. Your mom. Scott's jaw tightened. Then, slowly, he nodded. Yeah. When I was younger, we had nothing. She worked herself to the bone. Got sick. By the time I made enough money to help her, it was too late. Katie's expression softened. I'm sorry. She used to volunteer at this shelter. St. Catherine's. Even when she was sick, she'd go. Said kindness was the only currency that mattered. He laughed bitterly. I didn't understand then. Thought money would solve everything. Katie froze. Wait. St. Catherine's? On 7th? Yeah. Why? I volunteered there. Years ago, when I was in college. She stood, rummaged through a box in her closet, pulled out an old photo. Her, younger, grinning next to a group of volunteers. And there, in the background, a thin, kind-faced woman with Scott's eyes. She showed him the photo. Is that her? Scott's breath caught. How did you? I remember her. Mrs. Vale, right? She taught me how to make the world's best grilled cheese. Used to say it was a hug in sandwich form. Katie's voice cracked. She was wonderful. I didn't know she. I'm so sorry, Scott. The room felt too small. Too big. Scott couldn't breathe. This woman, this stranger who'd given him her scarf and her last meal, had known his mother. Had learned kindness from the same hands that raised him. It's not a coincidence, he said, voice raw. Maybe not, Katie whispered. Maybe the universe has a weird sense of timing. He should tell her. Right now. Who he was. What he'd done. That this whole thing started as a test. But the words stuck in his throat. Because telling her meant losing this. Losing her. So he stayed silent. And hated himself for it. Katie's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, groaned. Ugh. Client emergency. Brad wants the poodle logo, more aspirational. She looked at Scott. I have to go meet him. But will you still be here? When I get back. Scott stood. I should go. Or, she said, stepping closer, you could stay. Take a real shower. Eat something that isn't from a convenience store. And when I get back we can figure out next steps. Together. The kindness in her eyes was unbearable. Katie, I know you're used to being alone, but you don't have to be. Not right now. She grabbed her bag, scribbled her Wi-Fi password on a sticky note, pressed it into his hand. Stay. Please. Then she was gone. Scott stood in her tiny apartment, surrounded by the evidence of her life, her dreams, her struggles, her massive, reckless heart, and felt the full weight of what he'd done. He pulled out his phone, texted Rico, "I need a full background check on Katie Nicole. Everything." The reply came fast, "Already done. She's clean, boss. Broke as hell, but clean." Scott stared at the report Rico sent. Student loans. Late rent payments. Every dollar she made went to her brother's medical bills. And she'd still given him her scarf, her food, her home. He sat down hard. What have I done? Scott stayed. He told himself it was just for an hour. Just to get warm, then he'd disappear back into his real life. 3 hours later, he'd fixed her broken desk lamp, tightened the loose cabinet hinges, and was examining her ancient laptop with the intensity of a surgeon. When Katie returned, she stopped in the doorway, blinking. Did you fix my entire apartment?" Scott looked up, caught. The lamp was a fire hazard. It's been a fire hazard for 8 months. I called it ambient danger. She dropped her bag, grinning. What are you, some kind of secret handyman? I know my way around tools. Mysterious and useful. I'm upgrading you from acquaintance to guy I might actually miss. She peered at her laptop. Please tell me you can make this boot in under 10 minutes. Your hard drive's dying. I know. We have an understanding. It wheezes, I threaten it. We both continue suffering. Scott almost smiled. You need a new one. Cool. I'll just check my extra laptop fund. She opened an imaginary wallet. Oh look, it's empty. What a shock. Over the next week, something shifted. Katie would run into Scott on her late walks. They'd sit on benches, share food from bodegas, talk about everything and nothing. He learned she was an insomniac who stress-watched cooking shows. She learned he had a photographic memory and a surprising knowledge of classical architecture. Okay, but why do you know the exact dimensions of the Pantheon? She asked one night, laughing. I read a lot. When you're alone, books don't ask questions. Her smile softened. You're not alone anymore. You know that, right? Scott's chest tightened. Katie. I mean it. You've got me now. Whether you like it or not. She bumped his shoulder. We're friends, Scott. Weird, unlikely, probably doomed to disaster friends. But friends. He wanted to tell her everything. Wanted to confess. But he was terrified. Meanwhile, strange things kept happening to Katie. Her landlord said someone had, anonymously, paid 2 months' rent. A brand new laptop appeared on her doorstep with no return address. Her brother's medical bills were suddenly covered by a charitable foundation she'd never heard of. She mentioned it to Scott, bewildered. It's like I have a guardian angel with a credit card. Scott looked away. Maybe you do. I don't know whether to be grateful or creeped out. Be grateful, he said quietly. Someone obviously cares. One night, walking her home, it happened. They stopped under a streetlight. She looked up at him, eyes bright and fearless. Scott. Yeah. I'm really glad I met you. Even though I was a disaster on a sidewalk? Especially because of that. You're real. In a city full of filters and fake smiles, you're just you. She hesitated. And I like you. A lot. Which is probably stupid. He kissed her. Soft, tentative, like he was afraid she'd disappear. She melted into him, hands fisting in his jacket, and for one perfect moment, nothing else existed. When they pulled apart, she whispered, So, you like me too? More than I should. Good. She grinned. Because I was about to make it super awkward if you didn't. He laughed against her hair, holding her close, and felt something he hadn't felt in a decade. Hope. But in the shadows across the street, a camera clicked, and Scott's world began to collapse. The photo hit the underground network by morning. Scott Vale, the ghost, the untouchable Mafia boss, kissing some nobody on a street corner. His enemies smelled blood. Scott was in a meeting when Rico burst in, phone out. "We've got a problem." One look at Rico's face and Scott knew. He stepped out, took the phone. Surveillance photos. Him and Katie. Walking, talking, laughing. A text from an unknown number. "Cute girlfriend. Be a shame if something happened to her." Scott's blood turned to ice. "Lock down everything. I want eyes on her now." But he was already too late. Katie was leaving Joe's Coffee when the black SUV pulled up. Two men got out, expensive suits, dead eyes. She recognized danger when she saw it. She turned to run. They were faster. "Katie Nicole?" The taller one smiled like a knife. "We need to talk about your boyfriend." "I don't know what you're." Scott Vale. Also known as Dominic's second. Also known as the guy who runs half this city's, let's call it off-book commerce. He showed her his phone. Photos of Scott. Not homeless Scott. Real Scott. In a $1,000 suit, shaking hands with politicians. Standing over bound men. Cold. Powerful. Terrifying. Katie's world tilted. "No. That's not." "Oh honey. You really didn't know?" The man laughed. "That's precious. You thought he was just some down-on-his-luck guy. He's a mafia boss. And you were what, a social experiment? A charity case." The words hit like bullet. They left her standing there, shaking, and drove away. Katie pulled out her phone with trembling hand. Googled Scott Vale. The results destroyed her. Articles. Photos. Mafia enforcer. Suspected in multiple disappearances. Controls the East Side territory. Her Scott, the man who fixed her lamp and kissed her under streetlights, was a lie. She was sitting on the curb, crying, when he found her. "Katie," he rushed over, frantic. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" She looked up at him, and her expression stopped him cold. "Who are you?" "I can explain." "Who are you?" She stood, shaking. "Because the man I know doesn't show up in Google as a criminal. The man I know doesn't have enemies who threaten random graphic designers in parking lot. The man I know isn't a liar. It started as I was testing." He reached for her. She jerked back. "Testing what? How gullible I am. How far you could manipulate some broke, stupid girl who—" her voice cracked. "Was any of it real? Or was I just your little experiment?" "No. Katie, I swear." "You swear." She laughed bitterly. "You're a mafia boss who catfished me as a homeless guy and I'm supposed to believe your swear? I fell in love with you." The words hung in the cold air. Katie's tears fell harder. Don't you dare say that to me right now. It's the truth. I don't even know what truth is with you." She backed away. "Stay away from me, Scott. Or whoever you really are. I don't want your money. I don't want your protection. I don't want you. Katie, please. Go." He stood there, watching her walk away, and felt every piece of himself shatter. Rico pulled up moments later. "Boss." Scott got in the car, hollow. "Take me home." Behind them, Katie collapsed on her apartment floor and sobbed into her hands. And somewhere in the city, enemies smiled. The ghost had finally shown his weakness. For 3 days, Scott didn't sleep. He sat in his penthouse, staring at nothing, while Rico tried to manage the fallout. Word was out that he'd shown weakness. Rivals were circling. Business contacts were asking questions. He didn't care about any of it. "Boss," Rico said carefully, "the Kozlov situation needs your attention. Handle it." "The shipment from—" "I said handle it." Scott's voice was dead. "All of it. I'm done." Rico blinked. "Done with what?" "This. The life. The empire." He stood, walked to the window. "What's the point of controlling everything if I can't protect the one person who actually mattered?" "You're talking about the girl. Her name is Katie." Scott turned. "And she's the only real thing I've had in a decade. I destroyed that. For what? A test? My ego. He pulled out a sheet of paper. Started writing. What are you doing? Telling her the truth. All of it. 4 hours, Scott wrote. About his mother. The test. How Katie had shattered every cynical belief he'd built. How falling for her wasn't part of the plan, it was the only unplanned thing that ever mattered. How he didn't deserve forgiveness, but she deserved honesty. He signed it. Sealed it. Get this to her. Don't let her see you. Just make sure she gets it. Rico took the letter. And then what? Then I wait. And if she never wants to see me again, Scott's voice cracked. Then I live with that. Because she deserves the choice I never gave her. Meanwhile, Katie was surviving on spite and ice cream. Her friend Maya sat across from her, watching Katie angrily sketch logo concept. You've drawn 15 variations of a devil poodle. I think you're projecting. Brad wanted edgy. I'm giving him edgy. You're giving him nightmare fuel. Maya closed the laptop. Talk to me. About what? How I fell for a literal crime lord. How I'm so stupid I couldn't see. Stop. You're not stupid. He lied. That's on him, not you. Katie's eyes filled. But Maya, it felt real. The way he looked at me. The way he laughed. I know people. I'm good at reading people. And I really thought. That he loved you? Yeah, Katie whispered. I did. The letter arrived that night. Slipped under her door while she was in the shower. She almost threw it away. But curiosity, and something deeper, made her open it. She read it once, then again, and again. His words destroyed her. You asked if any of it was real. Katie, it was the only real thing in my life. She sat on her floor, crying, holding pages that smelled faintly like expensive cologne and desperation. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was giving her the truth. Raw. Painful. Complete. Maya found her like that an hour later. What do you need? Katie looked up, eyes red, heart cracked wide open. I need to know if people can change. If someone who's spent years being one thing can choose to be something else. I don't know, babe. Can they? Katie stared at the letter. Then she grabbed her jacket. I'm about to find out. Scott didn't hear her come in. His penthouse security was top tier, but he'd left her name on the permanent clearance list weeks ago. Just in case. Just hoping. He was standing at the window, whiskey in hand, when her voice cut through the silence. So this is how Mafia bosses brood. It's very dramatic. Do you practice in a mirror? He spun around. She stood in his living room. Jeans, oversized sweater, defiant expression masking the fear in her eyes. Katie, I read your letter. She stepped closer. Like 17 times. And I have questions. Okay. His voice was raw. Did you mean it? That it was real? Every word. Even the part where you said you'd walk away from all this for me? Scott set down his glass. I've already started. Rico's handling the transition. I'm out. Completely. Her breath hitched. Why? Because you were right. Power's meaningless if you're empty. And I've been empty for so long I forgot what it felt like to be alive. Then you sat next to me on a freezing sidewalk and offered me half an energy bar like I mattered. And I remembered. Katie's eyes filled. You lied to me. I know. You let me fall for someone who didn't exist. No. He stepped closer. I let you see the man I'd buried under years of armor and cynicism. That Scott. The one who laughed with you and fixed your lamp and kissed you like you were oxygen, that's who I actually am. I just forgot until you reminded me. That's a really good line. It's the truth. She wiped her eyes. I should hate you. You should. But I don't. I'm furious with you. I want to yell and throw things and make you suffer. I deserve all of that. Yeah, you do. She closed the distance between them. But here's the thing, Scott Vale. You don't get to decide you're irredeemable and walk away. You don't get to make one mistake and call it over. Because I didn't fall for a perfect guy. I fell for a broken one who was brave enough to let me see his cracks. His hands trembled as he cupped her face. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing. Every day. Even when it's scary. She looked up at him, fierce and fragile. So here's my choice. I'm giving you a chance. One chance. No more lies. No more tests. You want me? Then you get the real thing. Messy, complicated, all in. I want that, he whispered. I want you. However you'll have me. She kissed him then, hard, desperate, forgiving and claiming all at once. When they broke apart, she said, You're buying me a new laptop. A really expensive one. He laughed through tears. Done. And taking me to dinner. Somewhere ridiculous. Anywhere you want. And you're meeting my brother. If he doesn't like you, this is over. That's fair. She grinned. Also, I'm redesigning your entire penthouse. This sterile mob boss aesthetic is depressing. It's yours. All of it. 6 months later, they stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Catherine Vale Foundation, named after his mother, funded by his former empire, run by both of them. A reporter asked, Mr. Vale, what inspired this change? Scott looked at Katie, who was talking to a formerly homeless veteran, laughing at something he'd said, her hand on his shoulder like he mattered. I spent years testing whether kindness existed, Scott said. Then someone proved it did. And she didn't just change my life. She gave me one worth living. That night, on the same corner where they'd met, Scott sat down on the sidewalk. Katie stopped, hands on hip. What are you doing? He held up an energy bar. Want half? Her laugh echoed through the street as she sat beside him, took the chocolate chip half, and leaned against his shoulder. You're such a dork, she said. You're dork, he corrected. Yeah. She kissed his cheek. Mine. And in that moment, surrounded by the city that had witnessed his worst and his best, Scott Vale finally understood what his mother had tried to teach him. Kindness wasn't a test. It was a choice. And love was the greatest risk that always paid off. Alright, you made it to the end, which means either you loved this story or you're just really bad at quitting things. Either way, I respect it. Hit that subscribe button before you forget, because let's be honest, you will forget. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I need to know if my emotionally devastating love stories are going global or if it's just Dave from Ohio on repeat. No judgment, Dave. Appreciate you. Now go hydrate, maybe cry a little more, and I'll see you in the next one.